I was alone when the year changed. That wasn't the plan, it just worked out that way. My parents had gone to a neighbor's house a few streets over for a small New Year's gathering. Nothing loud, nothing wild. They told me they'd be back shortly after midnight. I was 19, home from college, and more than happy to stay behind. I liked quiet New Year's nights, watching the countdown, half listening to fireworks in the distance, feeling like the year was ending without demanding anything from me. The house felt normal at first. Christmas decorations were still up, the tree lights glowed softly in the living room. Wrapping paper hadn't been thrown out yet, just folded and stacked near the trash. The smell of pine and leftover food lingered in the air. Familiar, safe. At 11:40 p.m., I sat on the couch with the TV on low, scrolling on my phone while a New Year's broadcast played in the background. The volume was barely audible, just enough to remind me what time it was. I remember noticing how quiet everything outside had become. No cars, no voices, even the distant fireworks sounded muted, like they were happening somewhere else entirely. At 11:52, the hallway light flicked on. I hadn't turned it on. I stared at it for a second, annoyed more than scared. My first thought was that one of my parents had come back early. I called out, asking if they'd forgotten something. No answer. I walked to the hallway and turned the light off. As soon as the switch clicked, the house made a sound I'd never heard before. A deep, hollow thud, like pressure shifting inside the walls. The TV volume dropped by itself. Not muted. Lowered. I stood there, remote in my hand, staring at the screen. The broadcast continued normally. Laughing hosts, graphics counting down to midnight. I told myself it was a glitch. Old house, old wiring. New Year's Eve always did weird things to electronics. At 11:57, I heard footsteps upstairs. Slow, deliberate. I froze at the bottom of the stairs, listening. The steps weren't creaky or rushed. They sounded like someone walking carefully, as if they didn't want to make noise, but also didn't care if they did. I called out again. Nothing. I didn't go upstairs. Instead, I went back to the living room and sat down, heart pounding, trying to convince myself my parents had come back and were messing with me. That explanation felt thin, but it was the only one I had. The TV hosts started the final countdown. 10. At the same moment, I heard a door upstairs close, not slam. Close. 7. The hallway light turned on again. 5. The heater shut off. The silence was immediate and heavy. 3. I stood up, shaking, staring at the hallway, every instinct screaming that I should leave the house, but my legs wouldn't move. 2. A voice joined the countdown, not from the TV, from upstairs. 1. The voice stopped. The TV erupted into cheers. Fireworks filled the screen. Happy New Year banners flashed. Confetti fell. I didn't feel anything like relief. I felt watched. My phone buzzed in my hand, a text from my mom saying they were heading home now. I didn't reply. Instead, I noticed something wrong with the TV. The broadcast had looped. The same countdown was playing again, the same 10, 9, 8. But now the hosts weren't smiling. Their faces were frozen mid-expression, mouths moving out of sync with the audio. The cheering sounded distorted, stretched, like it was being played from far away. I turned the TV off. The sound kept going. It wasn't loud, it was coming from somewhere deeper in the house, like the walls themselves were replaying it. I ran to the front door and unlocked it, ready to bolt. That's when I saw the reflection in the dark TV screen behind me. Someone was standing at the top of the stairs. Not moving. Just watching. The countdown finally stopped. So did the footsteps. When my parents came home 10 minutes later, the house was bright and normal again. Lights on, heater running, TV off. They laughed when I told them what happened, said it was nerves, said New Year's Eve messes with your head. I didn't argue. But every year since, when the countdown reaches 0, I turn everything off. Because I don't think the house was celebrating the new year. I think it was marking the moment I was alone and listening. The first time my house was broken into, I didn't know it was happening. That's the part that still makes me sick when I think about it. It was New Year's Eve, and I was 20, still am, and home alone for the night. My parents had gone out of town earlier that afternoon to visit relatives, planning to be back the next morning. They'd done it before. I'd done fine before. I wasn't worried. I locked the doors, turned on the porch light, and settled into the living room with snacks and the TV. New Year's specials played quietly in the background. Laughter, commercials promising a better year. The house felt normal. Too normal. Around 10:30 p.m., I heard the first noise. A soft sound near the back of the house. Not a bang, not a crash. Just a brief scrape, metal against metal maybe. I muted the TV and listened. Nothing followed. I told myself it was outside, fireworks, someone slamming a car door. New Year's Eve came with noise. 10 minutes later it happened again, this time closer, near the kitchen. I stood up and checked the back door. It was locked, the deadbolt was still turned, everything looked fine. I even laughed at myself for being jumpy. That was mistake number one. By 11:15, I started noticing small things. The hallway light was on, the thermostat was set lower than usual. I hadn't touched it. I chalked it up to autopilot. People do things without realizing it all the time. At 11:32, my phone buzzed with a New Year's text from my mom. I replied, told her I was fine, and went back to the couch. That's when I heard footsteps. Not upstairs, not outside. Inside the house. Slow, careful. I froze, heart pounding, staring at the dark hallway. The footsteps stopped as soon as I focused on them, like whoever or whatever was moving had realized they had been heard. I whispered, hello. No response. I didn't call the police. I didn't grab a weapon. I didn't run. I sat back down. That decision still haunts me. The rest of the night felt wrong in a way I can't fully explain. Sounds didn't echo correctly. The house felt larger than it should have, like rooms were stretching when I wasn't looking directly at them. At midnight, fireworks exploded outside. The TV erupted with cheering. Confetti graphics filled the screen, and somewhere behind me, a floorboard creaked. I didn't turn around. I stayed on the couch until I fell asleep sometime after 1 a.m., exhaustion overpowering fear. I woke up late the next morning to sunlight and silence. For a moment, I convinced myself it had all been nerves. Then I stood up. The back door was unlocked, not broken, not forced, unlocked. I checked the house slowly, my hands shaking. Every room looked mostly the same until I noticed what was missing. My laptop was gone. My mom's jewelry box was empty. Cash from a drawer in my parents' room had vanished, but nothing else. No mess, no overturned furniture, no obvious signs of a struggle. Then I noticed the things that chilled me more than the missing items. The chair near the hallway was moved. The spare phone charger from the guest room was plugged into an outlet in the living room, and the kitchen window, locked the night before, had faint scratch marks around the latch. The police came. They took notes, asked questions. They said whoever did it knew what they were doing. Quiet, patient, experienced. They said it likely happened while I was home. I remember asking them how that was possible. One officer looked at me and said, they were probably testing you first. That's when everything clicked. The sounds, the lights, the footsteps that stopped when I noticed them. They weren't trying to scare me. They were watching, practicing, seeing how I'd react. The case went cold within weeks. No suspects, no fingerprints, no arrests. Years later, I still think about that night every New Year's Eve. About how close I was to turning around. About how someone moved through my house while I was awake and chose not to be seen. And what scares me most isn't that they broke in. It's that they could have done much worse and decided to wait. New Year's Eve is loud. That's something I learned to appreciate the year this happened, because when the noise suddenly stops, you notice it immediately. I was 21, staying alone in my childhood home while my parents visited relatives out of state. They trusted me with the house. I had stayed alone before. Nothing bad had ever happened there. It was a quiet neighborhood, the kind where people leave porch lights on and don't lock their doors until they go to bed. The week leading up to New Year's felt off, but I couldn't explain why. Decorations were still up, Christmas lights blinked along the street, neighbors were already hosting parties, music drifting through the cold air, laughter echoing late into the night. On New Year's Eve, I stayed inside. Around 9 p.m., fireworks started popping in the distance. I remember thinking how comforting it sounded, proof that people were nearby, awake, celebrating. I locked the doors before bed anyway. By 10:30, I was upstairs in my room, scrolling through my phone, the faint sound of music still floating in from outside. I could hear footsteps occasionally, but they were outside. Neighbors moving between houses, guests leaving, nothing unusual. That's when I heard the first sound, inside the house. A chair scraping. Downstairs. It was subtle, almost polite. I froze, listening. Nothing else followed. I told myself it was temperature change, wood contracting, old furniture shifting. The house was decades old. It had always made noise. I stayed in bed. A few minutes later, I heard it again. This time, unmistakable. Footsteps, slow, heavy, moving across the living room. Not pacing, crossing. I sat up, heart racing, listening carefully. The footsteps stopped right below the staircase. I waited for a voice, a call, a laugh, something to explain it. Nothing. What bothered me most wasn't the sound, it was how intentional it felt. Whoever was downstairs wasn't wandering, they were moving like they knew the layout. I grabbed my phone and texted a friend asking if they were nearby. They replied with a video from a party across town. Loud music, confetti, cheers. Everyone else was celebrating. I was alone. Then something happened that made my skin crawl. The music outside stopped. Not gradually, all at once. No fireworks, no voices, no cars passing. Just silence. I crept to the top of the stairs and looked down into the dark living room. I couldn't see anything, but I could smell something unfamiliar. Not smoke, not food. Cold air, like a door had been opened recently. I whispered, "Hello?" The sound of my own voice felt wrong in the space, like it didn't belong there. From the kitchen, I heard a cabinet door close, softly, carefully. I backed away from the stairs and locked myself in my room, my hands shaking so badly I dropped my phone. I stood there, listening as something moved through the house below me. Drawers opened, closed, a glass clinked against the counter. Whoever it was wasn't stealing, they were looking. After a while, minutes or hours, I don't know, the sounds stopped. Then I heard footsteps again, this time going up the stairs, slow, measured, stopping at the top, right outside my door. I held my breath. The doorknob didn't turn. Instead, something pressed against the wood, just enough for the wood to creak. Then it stepped away. I don't remember falling asleep. I only remember waking up to daylight and the sound of neighbors laughing outside, cleaning up from the night before. The house was empty, doors locked, nothing missing. I almost convinced myself it had been a nightmare, until I went downstairs. Every cabinet I'd heard had been opened, then closed, neatly. The back door, locked when I checked it, had fresh mud on the inside mat. The police said there was no sign of forced entry. They suggested I'd forgotten to lock something. But what they couldn't explain was why when I checked the security camera footage from a neighbor later that day, it showed something worse. At exactly the time the neighborhood went silent, people were still outside, still celebrating. The noise didn't stop. Only my house did. And whatever walked through it that night knew exactly where everything was.